This is From Both Sides, a spontaneous, free-flowing conversation featuring a dynamic team of women, providing insights into both political and civic events affecting the lives of women throughout Pennsylvania. And now, here's your host.
Hello, and welcome to a special edition of From Both Sides. I'm Michelle Saletto, your host, and we're here live at the University of Pittsburgh and the magnificent Cathedral of Learning to learn about the new Pennsylvania Governor's School for Global and International Studies. The program, designed by the Global Studies Center here at the University of Pittsburgh, invites sophomores and juniors from high schools all across Pennsylvania to apply for this exciting 4-week residential program on the Pitt campus. The program teaches cross-cultural understanding and critical language proficiency, necessary for our students to compete in today's workforce and global economy. Joining me today to tell us more about the program are my guests, who I'd like to introduce now. First of all, Dr. Michael Goodhart, Director of Global Studies Center and Associate Professor of Political Science, one of my favorite topics, here at the University of Pittsburgh. Welcome, Dr. Goodhart.
Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you. And we also have Cindy McNulty. She's faculty at Oakland Catholic High School and teacher of Social Studies and English.
Yes.
Cindy, thanks for being here.
Thanks for
Let's start out talking about give us a little bit of background about the Global Studies Center here at the University of Pittsburgh for our viewers.
Sure. The Global Studies Center is what's called a Title VI National Resource Center, which means that we have a grant from the Federal Department of Education under Title VI of the National Defense Education Act to help us provide language training, critical thinking skills, substantive knowledge about our particular part of the world. Now, in the case of a Global Studies Center, obviously that covers everything. And so we're more focused on thematic issues and connections, thinking about processes, the disruptions and connections that are connected to those processes, and so on. So thinking about globalization, if you will. That's the main focus of what.
Okay, great. And tell our viewers a little bit about the Governor's School for Global and International Studies, because we know that Pitt ran a Governor's School from about 1989 to 2008, I think it was, maybe it was 1984
I believe,
to 2008. And I do remember when the state funding stopped, it stopped a lot of governor schools in the state. But tell us about the Pennsylvania Governor's School here this year, new now at the University of Pittsburgh.
Sure. So after the program lost its funding from the state in 2008, so 2009 was the first year that it didn't run. We were obviously disappointed about that and began immediately searching for a way that we could try to bring it back. That took a couple of years, and then 4 years ago now, we developed a summer program which we mainly ran. It was not a residential program, and so therefore it was mainly for students in the Pittsburgh area, the local area. Mm-hmm. And through the efforts of a number of people, especially Jeff Whitehead in the Study Abroad office, who was also, I think, the president of PACE for a while, and Veronica Dristis in the Global Studies Center, who's also an alumna of the Governor's School program.
Is she? Oh,
she
okay,
is.
Great.
Their efforts and the efforts of lots of other people, including yourself, helped us to revive this program, which is completely funded now by Pitt. And we were able to recreate the program on the model that it existed on, a 4-week residential program with intensive language learning in the morning, as you mentioned, then a substantive portion that focuses on these critical thinking skills, what we like to call global thinking or thinking globally, again, about those processes and connections that help to make sense of our very highly interconnected world. So we were able to get the word out. We attracted something like 190 or so applications for the 60 slots that we had available. Fantastic applications from wonderful students, a couple of whom you'll speak with, and put together a fantastic program where the students learn one of 3 critical, less commonly taught languages in the morning, either Arabic, Chinese, or Portuguese. Then again, like I mentioned, they have this critical global thinking unit, and then they do some practical hands-on things in terms of learning to communicate effectively through reading, through writing. They do simulations, experiential learning, and some then things in the evening, cultural events, community visits with our partners around the city, and so on. So it's a really comprehensive program. I think we keep them really busy, and I think we're able to provide a lot of great opportunities for the students, so we're really pleased to bring it back.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Congratulations in bringing it back. Cindy, now you're faculty at Oakland Catholic High School, and so did you send students here? Are you part of the program actually here, or tell us about your experience?
Yes, well, I've been working with the Global Studies Center for quite a while because they have a very dynamic outreach to teachers. And so they do a lot of professional development programming. So I knew about that the Governor's School was going to be reinstated, and yes, there are 3 Oakland Catholic students who are part of the program this year.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now tell me this, so are these the experiences that we've just talked about? And I understand, in addition to the cross-cultural understanding and the language, you also talk about human rights, global health, the environment, inequality. Are these experiences, Cindy, in your perspective, from your perspective, that students would have normally in a high school environment?
Unfortunately, that's a kind of a sensitive question, but unfortunately, I think that we're still teaching social studies, I'll take for instance, in silos. We do a unit on China, and then we do a unit on Turkey, and we aren't getting the global links. So if you take something, for instance, like global health, teaching it across the globe, as opposed to looking at one individual country, is the way that this generation, that's how they're going to have to face these challenges, is to understand the interrelatedness, the interconnectedness, not only of these systems, but of people. And that, unfortunately, because of timing, because of the structure of schedules, isn't always possible. And the other thing that is very difficult to do in classrooms is the extended simulations. So for instance, we were able to take a 4-hour block to do a simulation on climate change. And that kind of thing is impossible to do in most classrooms.
And go deep into the issue and have students learn first and then apply.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So could you tell me then, from your perspective, and you mentioned some of this, what is it, let me say this, how would you define global competence? Because I know that we've talked a lot to members of the General Assembly about global education, and their first question is really, what is you want our students to have global competence, well, what do you mean by that? I'm not sure there's an agreed upon definition for Pennsylvania, but what would you each say about the definition of global competence for our students?
I think there are a number of components to it. I think some sort of facility with foreign language is important. I think that this critical global thinking is really essential. And let me just give a brief illustration picking up on something that Cindy said on the global health example. The traditional way of thinking about these things, we might look at the way public health is done in China, we might look at the way public health is done in Turkey. I think those were the ones you used. And then we might make comparisons between those and say, isn't this interesting? The global studies perspective, the kind of global thinking, and this to me is an essential part of that competency that you're asking about, is to think more in terms of something like, how do diseases spread? And how do borders and boundaries both slow down and speed up the spread of disease because of different ways in which those borders are managed and controlled? What kind of international bodies exist to try to regulate and address these kinds of problems? How do we think about the connection between something like the outbreak of disease and poverty and the kind of trade relationships that a particular country may be involved in, and trying to make those connections, which is difficult. And to me, global competence is not having mastered these things. I've been at this for 20 years and I've not come close to anything that you could call mastery, but it's learning a sort of reflexive way of thinking about a problem. When you hear something's happening in this place of in the world, not to assume it's about that place, but to immediately try and think about how it's about that place as it's connected to a much broader.
So it's not a singular issue, it's a much broader issue, and it's a really different way of looking at things.
It's a different way of looking at
Yes,
things.
yes.
Yes, exactly.
And I think, too, that where the students are connected to all of these things, for instance, we look at commodity chains, and we're looking at clothing and fast fashion. And so my students now have an understanding of how the fast fashion clothing that they're wearing is related to workers in Bangladesh, something that they may not have thought about at all before.
Well, could you talk a little bit about why it is important for Pennsylvania and America to make sure that we really produce students who are globally competent?
Yeah, that's, I think, a really important question. So let me use the city of Pittsburgh as a great illustration of this. 40 years ago, if we had been sitting here outside the doors, people would have been working in steel and in steel-related industries, right? These were the jobs, they were good-paying jobs that people had, and they needed to know, they were skilled labor positions, people needed to know their skill, and that was how they could make a good living. today outside these walls, it's Google, it's Uber, it's Duolingo, it's all the sort of medical technology and innovation that's going on. It's robotics across the street at CMU and so on. All of those industries, all of those fields of endeavor, whether we think of them as industries or as fields of research and scholarship, are ones that are intricately linked in with a much larger and complicated global economy, and that has repercussions, as Cindy was just describing, in terms of the manufacture of t-shirts and so on, all over the world. And so our students are going to need to be able to understand those connections and be able to successfully navigate a world in which knowing how your neighbors up the street live is equally important as knowing how your counterparts on the other side of the planet live. And just to have that sort of facility, that sort of I don't know, savoir-faire they call it, that way of just being able to get along in the world now requires that you understand the world in a different way than even when...
It really is required, isn't it, now, with the way the economy is and the way our world is a very different place. Well, a really quick fact, I just want to make sure that people understand that about 1.7 million jobs in Pennsylvania are tied to foreign trade in about 200 other countries, and about 1 in 5 of our jobs in Pennsylvania are tied to foreign businesses. So it really does have an impact if our students are able to compete and be ready in this kind of global economy. What kind of careers might students expect if they have a background in global education? I mean, what might the students, the 60 students here who leave, what might they think about doing when they go to college after this experience?
I would say, kind of flip that question. Where wouldn't they need more global competence? Because, you know, they're going to be working in very diverse workplaces, for instance. And, you know, we talk a lot, when we talk about diversity, we use this word tolerance, which I think is a really low bar for people getting along. And it's kind of like, you know, putting a distance between ourselves and others, as opposed to arriving at a deeper understanding and respect and empathy that comes from understanding these things at a very, very deep level. So I would flip the question and say, I think that you know, attaining a level of global competence is essential in certainly in education, in all kinds of business that I can think of.
And I mean, I would just add to that I think one of our goals with a program like this is not so much to steer students in a particular direction. This is just repeating what you said in a different way. Not so much send them in a particular direction, but to prepare them to go in whatever direction they go more effectively, more capably, right? So that whether they become academics or teachers or go into business or go into a trade, whatever it might be, that they will be able to do that equipped with the tools and sensibilities they need to be able to be successful in the 21st century.
Well, we have about a minute left before we take a break, so what advice might you give to parents? If parents were thinking about helping guide their students, what might you say to parents about the need for their students to be exposed to global competency experiences or global education experiences?
I think what is unfamiliar sometimes causes fear, and for them to put themselves into situations like the Governor's School, where they're going to become familiar with people that they might not encounter typically, will break down that fear, and I think that's a really key element.
Give people students more of a comfort level with lots of different people and different cultures.
I would just say also, I know that when it comes to global and international studies, many of the experiences that are available to students are often expensive. And education is already expensive in this country, and that's a subject for another show that you might do. But I guess I would say that to me, if it's possible, these are worthwhile investments, because the kind of experiential learning that it's possible to get. I mean, this program, we should emphasize, is free for the students who participate, which I think is important and fantastic. But in terms of other experiences, the opportunity to study abroad, for instance, when they're in school or whatever, I think those are really valuable experiences and worth the investment when it's possible. And I should say, just on that point, we're developing new ways to bring those similar kinds of experiences to all of our students without them ever necessarily having to leave campus. That's some of the work we're trying to do at the Global Studies Center.
That'll be really interesting. Well, thank you both. And right now we're going to take a break and we're going to hear from our sponsors. We'll be right back.
From Both Sides is a production of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy and is made possible by the support of the Pennsylvania Center for Women in Politics at Chatham University, a nonpartisan center devoted to fostering women's public leadership through education, empowerment, and action. The first to focus on women's political involvement in Pennsylvania, the center integrates disciplinary knowledge, civic education, and capacity building, while examining the intersection of women and public policy. From Both Sides is also supported as a public service by Saul Ewing LLP, a law firm with a 100-year tradition of serving the needs of business, government, education, healthcare, technology, and manufacturing in our region. And by the University Center for International Studies, the engine for extending the global reach of the University of Pittsburgh and its students. From Both Sides is also sponsored by Dr. Wendell Funk, one of Central Pennsylvania's most experienced cosmetic plastic surgeons. Dr. Funk is a leader in new and innovative non-invasive procedures like cool sculpting. His long-term experience with all types of cosmetic surgery, as well as facial injectables, keeps new and repeat patients returning to his practice in Lancaster, York, and Camp Hill. From Both Sides is also sponsored by the Ed and Jeannie Arnold Foundation.
Hello and welcome back to From Both Sides. We've been here learning about the Pennsylvania Governor's School for Global and International Studies, and we've spoken to two people who were very directly involved, two adults. Now we're going to hear from two students who have been here for the last month learning about global and international studies here at the University of Pittsburgh. So I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves, tell us your name, your level in school, and your school district.
Sure. My name is Ronak. I'm a rising senior at New Hope Solbury High School.
Okay, great. And?
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Allison Andruskavage. I'm a rising senior at Pittston Area High School.
Okay, well, welcome to both of you. We're glad that you're here joining us. So let's start by asking each of you to tell me, how did you learn about the Governor's School program?
So I was looking for something to do global studies related, and this just happened to be the perfect fit after scrolling through pages and pages online.
Okay.
I didn't know that Pennsylvania would have a Governor's School for Global and International Studies, and being that's the first year that the program's revived as a residential program, this was perfect.
Okay, excellent, great. How about you, Allison?
Quite contrary to Ronak, I came across this kind of as a surprise. I walked into one of my classes and my math teacher said, "Hey, we got this email from the administration for advanced students, so I think you should check it out." And I read over the application, and I just fell in love, and I just decided to apply for it.
Well, that's fantastic. Tell me, how did you originally become involved have an interest in global studies?
Well, I mean, I think I've always had a passion for other perspectives, and I've always been naturally curious, and I just always want to know more. And I think the basis for global studies is learning, and that's why I think this is a good fit for me.
Excellent. How about you, Ronak?
I've always had an interest in politics in particular, and coming out of that, learning about more how our state and nation functions has made me realize that there's a lot more than just the United States to learn about, and even within the United States, politics is very interconnected with the global world. So
Yes,
I thought
it
that it'd be
is.
something that I might even want to study college in the past.
Okay, great. That's fantastic. Well, you've both been here just about a month. Our closing ceremonies are tomorrow. Tell me a little bit about your favorite aspects of the program.
So my favorite aspect is probably Global Studies class, which is the core of the program, because we learn a lot about different perspectives and we meet a lot of cool people. So just this morning we got to Skype with a bunch of high schoolers who are Syrian refugees. And it was really interesting because you start to learn as you meet all these new people how much of a story that there are from perspectives that aren't ours. And also, the class is very different in the sense that in school, generally subjects are boxed into those complacent stereotypes. You have history, and then you have science. But then when we learn about climate change, we learn both about the science behind it and the social impact. So that has to be my favorite aspect.
So
of the
it's a
program.
much bigger picture you're learning than just any singular aspect, as we talked about earlier in
Yeah,
the show.
for sure. Not only geographically, but also the actual subjects that we're learning,
Okay,
all intertwined.
that's great. How about you, Allison? How did you start getting interested in global studies?
I think that it's for this. I think it's quite remarkable that every part of the day we are immersed in culture, whether it's in language class, whether it's in argumentation class, whether it's in global studies, and even outside of the classroom. All of the activities are absolutely amazing, and we do dances, we sing, we watch films, and it's just a really amazing experience.
Well, I'm interested in your argumentation class. I think that's something I'd like. Tell me about that.
Well, my particular argumentation class was a lot of fun. I was taught by Dr. Lisa Bromberg, and she is absolutely amazing. And the main thing about that class was we had to evaluate sources in order to make strong arguments, and we had a lot of open discussions, which was quite interesting. And then we would leave the classroom and we would still be debating, and it caused
Sounds
a lot
great. Sounds great.
Yeah.
Like a lot of really good, thoughtful,
Yes.
thoughtful interactions. Well, tell me about your experiences with the language portion of the school. I think that's one of the things that I'm concerned about. Many years ago, when I was a superintendent, 20 years ago, I started teaching, having students taught French in kindergarten, so that as they went through school, would graduate with more than one language. I'm not sure they kept that up after I left, but I understand that you're exposed here to Arabic, Chinese, and Portuguese. So tell me about the experiences with language, because I think that's really would be fascinating here.
Yeah, so each of us take one of the 3 courses, and I'm in Chinese, but it's not your typical language class. You learn one a lot for 4 weeks, and also it's not just language that you're learning, it's a lot of cultural immersion.
Okay.
So you learn about, we do at least, what it's like to live in China, and then we do that through the lens of the Chinese language, so we're learning Mandarin. And then also, there was one Saturday where we went out to Szechuan Express, just a local Chinese restaurant, but on the stipulation that we could only speak in Chinese for that whole meal.
Okay.
So we ordered in Chinese, we spoke in Chinese, and that was great. And I think I've learned a whole lot for just 4 weeks.
Had you taken Chinese before?
I take Spanish, and I think Spanish is something I'm going to continue, as well as Chinese if I could do both.
Yeah, I was telling my niece about the program. She's 16, and she said, well, how much can I learn, in 4 weeks? But it sounds like you've learned a lot.
Yeah, surprisingly a whole lot.
Okay, and how about you, Allison? What language aspect are you taking?
I take Arabic, and all of our language teachers here are native speakers. So my teacher is from Egypt, and he moved here when he was 37 years old. So he knows a lot about the culture, and as Ronak mentioned, we're not just learning language, we're learning language through the Arabic culture, the Chinese culture, and the only language experience that I had previously was Spanish, which is taught at my school by non-native speakers, so it's very, very interesting to get this perspective.
Interesting. What do you do on the weekends? And you mentioned going out for Chinese, but what else do you do on the weekends when you're here? Because you're here for a full month.
Yeah, so a lot of it is related to global studies. We like to say, think globally, act locally. So one big thing we do is charity. So this weekend we went to Global Links, which is a local group that collects medical supplies and donates them off to foreign countries.
Fantastic.
So we were doing quality checks and packaging for them. And then we also do a lot of fun stuff with friends. So just last night we went out for karaoke, which was a lot of fun.
Okay.
And we went out to a Pirates game, jazz concert, a lot of interesting stuff.
Okay. Well, when you go back to your schools in Pittston and New Hope, what do you think you would tell your fellow students or students in earlier grades about if they had an interest in coming here? What might you tell them, Allison?
I would say absolutely 100% try and go for it, because I never thought I would get into a program as amazing as this, and I did. And when I found out, I cried my first tears of joy, and it was a really awesome experience. So I would tell the people, just try to do it, and then when you get there, because you have the ability to get there, always say yes.
Oh, that's great. That's great. How about you, Ronak?
Yeah, I would definitely say do it. I like to say get comfortable being uncomfortable, because a lot of people would not like this experience, or they'd think that this isn't something they're interested in because they don't want to go into global studies, international affairs. But regardless of whatever avenue you take, all the skills that we learned here are going to be valuable, and just the opportunity to meet new people and kind of step out of our comfort zones, learn about things that we wouldn't have otherwise, is a lot of fun.
Okay, good. What do you think you're going to study when you graduate from high school, each of you?
Well, I have a lot of areas of interest, but I never like to define what I'm going to do. I always tell people, hey, I'm interested in this, and I would like to travel, and I would like to write, and I would like to speak a lot of languages, and I would like to help people and do charitable works, but whatever job title that actually is, I don't know, but I'm just open to a career of spontaneity.
Do you know where you want to go to school?
I would like to go to Wellesley College in Massachusetts. That's my top pick.
Okay, well, that's a great school.
It is, thank you.
How about you?
I think I want to study political science and international affairs. It's something I've been interested in for a while, and I think it's one of the best ways that I can have an impact as I go. And past college, I have no idea. I think if I knew what I wanted to do, that would change anyways, so it's better that I know that I don't know.
Okay, okay. Well, how do you think that the Governor's School has shaped your knowledge and understanding of the world and other cultures?
I think that the Governor's School has challenged me to look at everything from the smallest issue to the biggest issue through a different lens, not just an American lens, and to really think about how things connect and about how our actions impact those around us and the entire global community it affects them.
Okay, how about you?
I would have to say one of the biggest perspective shifts I had was getting rid of my confirmation bias. I think a lot of the times, being really interested in politics, I obviously have my own opinions, and it's so easy to look for facts, look for people who will reinforce those opinions. But coming here to argumentation, we have a great teacher, David Cerniglia, and he always pushes us to think critically, think about the other side of the arguments. And that's kind of made me realize that I'm doing things backwards. Instead of looking for facts to back up my opinion, I should be looking for the facts, looking for people to talk to, and then formulate a conclusion based off of that. And that's really changed the way I think about the world.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I think you're a great commercial, both of you, for the next Governor's School. Appreciate you joining us, and I want to thank everyone today for joining us here at the University of Pittsburgh and the Governor's School for Global and International Studies. It's my pleasure to also share that a group I work with, the Pennsylvania Council for International Education, educators who promote global education, are joining with the Pennsylvania General Assembly to create a task force in Pennsylvania to study global education, to expand Pennsylvanians' understanding of the critical need for global competence and its impact on our economy. We'd like to thank Senator John Eichelberger and Senator Andy Dinniman for their foresight and leadership to move the creation of this task force forward. And again, special thanks to the University of Pittsburgh for being in the forefront of ensuring our students will be global-ready graduates for Pennsylvania's future. And remember, as women in Pennsylvania, there's much more that unites us than divides us. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you'll join us again.